Today, we're going inside a moment that almost never happens at this scale. When people who build a company breakthrough technology wake up virtually overnight as multi-billionaires. Last fall, more than 600 former and current OpenAI employees were given a chance to sell a chunk of their shares as part of a secondary sale tied to an October financing round. Each person was allowed to sell up to $30 million worth of stock, and they sold at about $6.6 billion. Roughly 75 people hit the $30 million ceiling. Others chose to sell as less, and some donated a portion of their shares to charity. Now, with one of the largest IPOs in history on the horizon, those numbers may be the first chapter in a much bigger wealth story. Thank you for listening to Business Insights Daily. I'm your host, Sashank. What happens to a company sold when hundreds of its builders suddenly become rich? As you listen, keep this question in the back of your mind. When the researchers and engineers find a world-changing technology, all become extraordinarily wealthy at once. Does that make the mission stronger? Or does it change what people are really known for working? OpenAI didn't go public yet. Not yet. It used a mechanism that's becoming increasingly common for late-stage, high-valuation startups, a secondary share sale. Rather than the company issuing new stock, existing shareholders, mostly employees and early insiders, were allowed to sell some of their stake to new investors as part of a broader funding round. Key details. Each 600 of current and former employees participated. Each was allowed to sell up to $30 million worth of stock. In total, they sold about $6.6 billion. In addition, around 75 employees maxed out the $30 million cap. Some employees chose to sell less, either keep more upside for personal reasons and handful donate shares to charitable causes. For many of these people, it wasn't just a big day, it was a life-altering one. For years, they'd been paid in a mixed salary and equity in a company that on paper was worth a lot, but to stock they couldn't easily sell. Overnight at least, part of that paper wealth turned into cash. Is this a reward for past work or a down payment for even more in the future? Which leads to a second question. When you hand out billions in realized gains before an IPO, are you simply rewarding people for what they've already built? Or are you also changing how they'll think and behave as the company barrels towards public markets? There are a few reasons why the leaders behind a multi-billion-dollar company like OpenAI might choose this path. Number one, retention and morale. When valuations soar in hundreds of billions, employees can feel rich on paper but still face everyday financial stress, student loans, mortgages, and family needs. Allowing them to sell some shares can reduce pressure to leave for a sure thing elsewhere and reward those who've taken the risk of just staying. Number two, talent magnet. Stories of early team members becoming multimillionaires are powerful recruiting tools. In a tight global market for top AI talent, being able to say our people already realize life-changing outcomes can make such a difference. 3. Governance and alignment. Giving early insiders partial liquidity can help diversify their personal risk. Instead of every decision being framed by I can't jeopardize my only shot at a big payer, you can, in theory, afford to look longer term. At the same time, a big public secondary sale sends a message to the world. Investors are willing to pay very high prices to own a piece of this company before it ever lists on public exchange. That reinforces the narrative that an eventual IPO could be one of the largest ever. The human side, life after 30 million. Let's zoom in on the people. Imagine you're a researcher or engineer who joined OpenAI 5 or maybe 6 years ago. You worked long hours in a system that is now front page news. you're worried about AI safety and impact, and you're also still living in an apartment, paying off your loans. Then one day, you get the option, and it really is an option to sell enough stock to net up to $30 million before tax. For some employees, what suggest full amount, effectively getting financial independence in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Others sold a smaller portion, balancing immediate security with belief in a future upside. And smaller group donated shares to charitable causes, signaling that they want to see their windfall as a partly as a tool to support work beyond OpenAI's walls. This raises tricky questions. How do people show up work after that? Especially when their financial life is suddenly de-risked? Do they feel more free to push back decisions they disagree with? Or are they less motivated to stay through difficult stretches? Does the cultural center of gravity shift when many individual team members now have more personal wealth than the founders of typical startup? Can you still think like a nonprofit when everyone around you is suddenly rich? Would set up the third big question for a company with a mission-driven, quasi-non-profit identity. What does it mean when so many of its people now have fortunes tied its next financing rounds and how the IPO plays out? All of this is happening with much larger event looming in the background. An IPO that many expect to be the biggest in market history. If and when OpenAI goes public, secondary sale becomes a kind of press rehearsal for wealth creation on an even larger scale. Remaining employer equity plus investor stakes could reprice again, potentially by hundreds of billions. The company could transition from a hybrid structure to a usual governance that's fully scrutinized in public entry, accountable to quarterly earnings and a much wider base of shareholders. Transition has implications. Strategic choices may push for faster revenue growth, brand monetization, and more aggressive product rollouts. The safety versus speed aspect also states that internal debates how quickly to shift powerful models could be influenced, consciously or not, the fact that billions more are in value are hanging in balance. And transparency. Being public means more disclosure on finances, partnerships, and risks, including how the company approaches safety and alignment. So, but secondary sale essentially ensured that when the IPO arrives, a significant number of insiders will also have some financial cushion, which means that it might influence how willing they are to stay and take on principled stance. What this signals about AI is business. Step back. This one transaction tells us something where we are in AI business. AI labs are no longer just research outputs. They're being treated as potential mega caps in the waiting, valued on par with the world's largest companies. The infrastructure that they hold, models, APIs, platforms, being priced like a new kind of utility, a base layer other industries will depend on. And capital is spreading the scale that compresses timelines. Companies that might be taking 15 years to reach tech giant valuations are doing it in less than 10. The ecosystem that creates both opportunity and concentration. Concentration of power, capability, and handfuls of labs whose governance and incentive suddenly matter to everyone, from small businesses to governments. And the opportunities for startups that build on top of these models, or specializing in safety, ruling, domain specific applications. Secondary sale at OpenAI is just a microcosm of that. Huge sum changing hands quietly in private transaction among a relatively small circle of employees and investors, all before a broad public shareholders get a chance to participate. So the next time you interact with an AI system or read a headline about another eye-popping valuation, it might be worth remembering that behind those models, the people whose lives have already been transformed by this technology, not just intellectually, but financially. And the choices that they make next will shape not only their own future, ours as well. Thank you for listening to Business Insights Daily. I'm your host, Shank, and I'll see you next time. As always, stay informed and stay ahead. Thank you for listening.